pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I will give my usual thanks to Starbucks of Lexington Center for the coffee, which helps, which makes possible the period of fellowship that we have before each meeting. And thank you so much to the volunteers who brought the wonderful baked goods that we have to go with the coffee. And thank you for your generous donations of cash in the basket, which provides our operating revenue. We do have a couple of very interesting announcements before our regular program begins. The first one, I would like to introduce Jim Ramsey from our executive committee, who in turn will introduce our guest. Jim.
Thank you, Linda. Good afternoon.
You got to use the microphone.
How's this? That's better. Okay. I'm here to happy to introduce Maureen Sullivan, who is project coordinator with the Native Veterans Oral History Project. This offers veterans a great way to tell their stories and also preserves those stories for the veterans and their families and for others who are interested in seeing firsthand accounts of military service. I've seen the benefits of the program myself in my work as a volunteer at the library at the Bedford VA Hospital. I basically take books and companionship around to the veterans in the long-term care units. And just a couple of incidents from that I'd like to relate to you because I think it shows the value of the program. I became aware of the project 2 years ago when a veteran whom I knew asked if I wanted to, and who had participated in Maureen's program, asked me if I wanted to see the video that was done of his interview, where he told his story of his service as a Marine in Vietnam. Well, of course, I was honored that he would ask me to do this, and I did look at it. It was very professionally done, and it was an exciting story, and I kind of filed that away until just a couple of months ago when Maureen and I worked together on a partnership between her group and the library to kind of offer this service on a more formal basis to the veterans over there. We did an interview together of a veteran who I had known quite well, and he enjoyed the process. It worked very well. He was happy. He ordered a bunch of copies of the DVD. Actually, I shouldn't say that because she's supposed to only provide one copy to the veteran, but I think there's some flexibility there. I was just really impressed. And so I guess because I think each of us has a story to tell, this is a real good way to do it. So with that, I'll introduce Maureen to take a few minutes to tell you about the program.
Okay. Thank you all very much. And first of all, I would like to thank the Lexington Veterans Association for inviting me here. How many of you heard of or knew Tom Hudner from Concord? Quite a few. Okay. For those who don't know Tom Hudner, he was a Congressional Medal of Honor winner. He was buried in Arlington National Cemetery last week, and he interviewed for the Native Veterans Oral History Project. He is one of more than 300 interviews we have in our collection. We started back late 1997 when a World War II survivor named Eugene Dugdale, who survived the attack on Pearl Harbor, started asking, you know, we really should get these interviews down before it's too late. And thanks to my library, which is the Morris Institute Library, and the Native Veterans Council, we got the program underway in March of 1998. and I've been coordinator since 2010. We have interviews from World War II, Korea, Vietnam, all the way to Iraq, Afghanistan. We have another Congressional Medal of Honor winner. We also have another Pearl Harbor survivor. We basically have folks who have been in almost every major engagement across the years. Now, for those who are curious, okay, are these interviews available? The answer is yes. We keep a DVD collection in the library. The interviews are also available on YouTube. And we also have a website called nativevets.org, which is in the process of being reconstructed. That includes the interviews in a video, in an MP3 format, photos, PDFs. I mean, we got one interview, World War II veteran who had a 100-page diary. And it makes very interesting reading. Yes, that's going to be on the website as well. Unfortunately, I can't really stay all that long because I have to be in Medfield in about an hour. But we do have flyers, we have rack cards, we have interview packets and fact sheets for those who are interested in getting any more information. But is there anybody here with any questions?
I don't have a question, it's just really a comment. One of the real benefits of this program is for the veterans and their families. Yes, the information is available to the public, but often a veteran wants to leave something for his family, and often we just can't find the time to talk about it, and so all of a sudden the time has gone by. And so the family unit is really a major beneficiary of the program.
We do get inquiries from researchers all around the world who find out about the project. And is there anything else? Like I said, there's more information over there. Yes, sir.
So the website is listed in one of those flyers?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And if there is nothing else, thank you again for having me, and I will turn it back over to you. Thank you, Maureen.
So if anyone feels you have a story to tell for your family, for posterity, please take some of that literature and get in touch with Maureen. It's a most generous offer, and really posterity will be the beneficiary. So thank you. Thank you, Jim, for bringing this to our attention. I said earlier, it's Patriots Weekend. Lexington celebrates Patriots Weekend in a big way. I'd like to introduce a member of our executive committee, Lorraine Marquis, who just happens to be the chair of the Lexington Town Celebrations Committee, which puts on Patriots Weekend, and she's just going to give us a quick summary of what's going to happen next weekend, if you happen to be in town. Lorraine.
Good afternoon, everybody. Like I said, I chair the Town Celebrations Committee, so I'm going to put on my TCC hat. For anybody who doesn't, well, I just got introduced. Aside from the reenactment on the parade, we are very happy to tell you about the Old Guard is coming to the green. It's not actually a last-minute decision, but they didn't finalize till recently, so a lot of this hasn't really been publicized, so I'm trying to bring out a couple of things that are different. So the Old Guard is coming to the green, and they're doing a firing demonstration at 12 o'clock on Saturday the 14th, and they will stand around to chat, take pictures, and answer questions. Also on Saturday at 3 o'clock, the Fife and Drum of Colonial Williamsburg and William Diamond Jr. Fife and Drum will do a concert at Tower Park, followed by the Tower Hill Battle. I have copies of our schedule of events and a flyer with a couple of reinforcements of what I just told you. Please take them and read them. There's so much going on, I can't even begin to tell you. And look at our website, because everything's on the website. There's constant updates. So if you've already looked at it, look at it again. And we work very hard to put on all these activities, and we really take a lot of pride in them, and sometimes our hardest job is to get the people to come. So read the materials, spread the word, and pray for good weather. Happy Patriots Day, everybody. Thank you, Linda.
Promotional video about Patriots Day that we're going to show.
Today is Monday, April 17th, and it is a glorious day for a parade, a marathon, and for our beloved Red Sox. I'm Colleen Smith, and I will be announcing the parade today with my good friend Jim Shaw. Jim, good to be here with you, again.
Is this our 5th year now?
I think it
I
is.
think it's our 5th year together, Colleen. It's always a great working with you.
well. We hope to see you at one or more of the events next weekend. Thank you, Ed, for showing that. All right, now, time to introduce our speaker. He's been very patient. Well, Bill Rose is an historian, and he's a detective. And he won't stop until he finds the answer he is looking for. It took him years to solve this particular mystery, but he did it. Everyone knew approximately where Captain John Parker assembled his Minutemen to wait in ambush for the British as they marched back from Concord. It was somewhere within a multi-acre field with a few hills and a few woods within the Minuteman National Park. But somewhere wasn't good enough for Bill Rose. He decided that posterity deserved to know the exact location of an event that contributed to the formation of our nation. So Bill is going to tell us the story of how he managed to cut through the red tape and the bureaucracy to raise the initial seed money through private donations, to inspire volunteers to donate hard physical labor over a 3-year period, to locate the exact site of Parker's revenge. And he'll also regale us with some anecdotes that may not be in the history books, but that are fascinating bits of history. Bill is a 1971 ROTC graduate of Brown University. He served for 5 years in the US Navy, including a tour with Westpac, retiring as a lieutenant. He earned an MBA from Harvard, and he spent 15 years in the computer startup industry, and then he specialized in acquiring business turnarounds. He is a devoted volunteer for Run to Home Base, which serves veterans suffering from PTSD and traumatic brain injury since 9/11. And he lectures frequently on the American Revolution. So we are really in for a marvelous program. Please welcome Bill Rose.
Apparently you're not until I get turned on here. There we go. Is everybody awake? So a couple of ground rules before we really get into the show here. First of all, anybody under the age of 50 has made a mistake. You're in the wrong room, from what I can see. There's the door. You can probably understand right off the bat, don't take me too seriously except when we're talking about the facts. So, first of all, thanks to all you veterans and your sacrifice and, which isn't said often enough in my humble opinion, the sacrifices of your families. Without that, I wouldn't be up here being able to talk to you guys, so I appreciate that, so thank you. Another thing about me, first of all, what Linda read is, who is that guy? I never really am comfortable with those introductions. But there is one thing, I am the smartest guy in the room, and if anybody thinks they're smarter than me, there's the door as well, because this is my show, not yours. However, during some of this misplaced education that I got, I am a giant fan of the Socratic method. So I'm going to be asking a lot of questions of you guys. And moreover, this should be interactive. So in the process of this, ask questions of me, because that's how we're both going to learn by the time this thing is over. So don't be hesitant. If you don't ask a question in the middle of this show, your problem, not mine. You certainly can answer after or ask questions afterward as well. And anything's fair. This is a murder mystery, and the question is who was murdered. Maybe some of you know. If you don't, we'll figure that out as well, I hope. It's also an exercise in the little people. First of all, you notice that's not me. That's Dr. Meg Waters. Who the heck is she? Well, I'm becoming Meg Waters, and you'll understand that as time goes by. A little bit about history, because I'm convinced that none of us knows much about it. Before I got to this history question, though, when I was a young guy, I was absolutely hopeless at angular momentum and the things that an engineer needed to know. So I was a lousy engineer, so I didn't become an engineer, because I was pretty good at statistical thermodynamics and quantum mechanics. Why I couldn't do angular momentum, I don't know. So I became a chemist. But one of my roommates helped me with all the tough questions, and he became a venture capitalist. And a few years ago, I was talking with him, and I said, how do you decide what to do with your money? And he says, I always look the person in the eye and ask 2 questions. Who cares? So what? Those are the 2 questions. Do you think that applies to history? Absolutely. Because all of this that I'm doing is, so what? Who cares? Well, let's see if we can figure out the so what and the who cares and see whether any of this stuff that's a 230-plus-year-old murder mystery applies to today. So, how smart are you? I'd like to ask you a question. Give me the day, the month, and the year that the commander-in-chief sent our army looking for weapons of mass destruction, didn't find them, they may never have been there, and a large number of years have ensued of incredible expenditure of blood and treasure. Let's go. First question. I know the answer. You guys, somebody answer it up. Yes, ma'am?
Is it April 18th, 75?
Okay, there's a possible answer. Anybody got another one? Well, you win. So that's exactly right. The commander-in-chief of His Majesty's forces in North America was whom on April 1875? Thomas Gage, exactly. Whose army was there? There's only one army. That was the King's. Weapons of mass destruction, what are they? This side of the room. Come on. Cannon, exactly. Not muskets. Cannon. Those would stop a battle. In fact, at Monroe Tavern, when Percy's Revenge column showed up, they fired a couple of rounds that bounced down Mass Ave, and one went through the meeting house. All of us guys dressed in our Sunday best, there were the militia and the minute companies, stopped dead and said, wait a minute, cannon's that's not part of this game. And the battle stopped for almost an hour and a half. Were the weapons of mass destruction at Barrett's Farm? Yes. Were they there on April 19th? No. They had been moved. How many years of war ensued after this little fracas on April 18th, 19th? 8 years. And when was the last battle of the American Revolution? You guys are sort of good, but see, this one's got you, huh? Last battle of the American Revolution took place on June 6th through the 10th of 1783. Where was it? Wise guy? No. Oh, you're no good. It's off the southeast coast of India in a small town called Cuddalore, which is about 20 miles south of Pondicherry. What happened here spawned a world war. Never, ever forget that. So now I'm going to throw you the easiest question of the day. When is Independence Day in America? I'm going to ask a question again. When is Independence Day in America? Now it's a good time to shut up. It is not the 4th of July. It has never, ever been the 4th of July. It will never be the 4th of July. I have this magical little box that does stuff. I don't know what this thing is. If I can call it up and do it right. All right. That these united, inserted in a caret, somebody didn't plan on that in the beginning, that these united colonies are and ought to be free and independent states, period. First sentence. Second sentence, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connections between them and the British state is and ought to be dissolved. All right, Ed, we've had our first malfunction. Why did you not like my collar? How's that? Let's try that for a while. That was resolved on the 2nd of July. That is the law that made us a country. Period. There is no argument about that. I am the world's smartest man, so don't start arguing now. That is our Independence Day. The interesting thing is this resolution was number 5 on the list of things done in Philadelphia that way. So I guess independence wasn't that big a deal. It wasn't the first order of business. It was number 5. But July 2nd is and always has been our Independence Day. July 4th is the adoption of the Declaration of Independence, which is the same way as calling it Wisconsin Cheese Day. It's not a big deal. It has no merit in law. We are independent on the 2nd of July. So now I'm done. You've learned something. I've accomplished my mission. Anybody want to hear about this? Let's give it a shot. So what? Who cares? So Meg Waters, I met in a wasn't the best meeting. Some of the things that Linda said is true. About 7 years ago, I went to the Superintendent Nancy Nelson of Minuteman National Park and said, gee, you just got done digging up Barrett's farm. You looked in the privy and you looked in the well and you stopped. Yeah. He said, well, we don't have any money. I said, you know, I've heard that we don't have any money business all my entire life, and money is always the easiest thing to get. You don't think so, but money is always the easiest part. It's all the rest of the stuff that's so much more difficult. So I said, Nancy, we got to do something. And I've always wanted to be an archaeologist, so, you know, can I do this? And she says, no, you cannot touch the ground. And I said, why not? It's public land. It's my ground. No, 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 no. You're not an archaeologist. It's against the law. It's everything else. But you can think about it. And I said, as you can probably tell already, I'm not wired that way. It's just, no, sir, you don't say no to me. I don't like that. So what can we do? So I did raise some money because she said we don't have any. I said, great, here's $10,000. Now what can we do? And we got the Friends involved. The president there is Bob Morris. And after about 1.5 years, we got the first 10 people to go cut brush and start to clear the site of, quote, Parker's Revenge. We worked for about 7 hours and cleared over almost 2 acres of land, and Nancy couldn't believe it. Because we weren't government employees, she only expected to have about 100 square feet cleared, and we cleared 2 acres. And she did not have enough trucks to come and clear it away, and she was angry at me, and I went, yeah, what's your point? And then they said, wow, maybe something can happen. So the first thing the Friends went out is hired Meg Waters. And of course, I am the world's smartest man in any particular meeting, and I walked in and I said, who are you? That's not exactly the most social way to start a meeting. And she, little 5'5.5" of her, looked right back at me, who the heck are you? And I went, okay, now we got a contest. The trouble with Meg was she was an Eastern Mediterranean prehistory. Yeah, exactly. That has a lot to do with this guy. She didn't even know who John Parker was. Her PhD is actually in geophysical stuff, which makes a little bit more sense. Now, to be absolutely squared away, Meg and I are absolute best buddies. We do this pitch back and forth. She's the principal investigator, but I'm on her documents, so technically speaking, I can do this because I own the right to do it. So she did a spectacular job. It's not clear they could have picked a better person than Meg to do this. So there's sort of, here's what we've done. And have we accomplished anything? Beats me. What's this? Who are those guys? Well, that would be John Parker right there. And that screwball third from the left over there looking kind of quizzical is me. There's a couple other Lexington Minutemen and all in this. But this is the picture painted by Don Troiani of the Green. By the way, the guy portraying Parker is a lieutenant colonel in the Marine Raiders. He's a special operations guy, currently on a business trip, as they say, in our defense. What do we know of what John Parker did? Here's one of those Socratic questions. What did Parker do? Does anybody know anything about Parker?
Rode a horse.
Parker may have ridden a horse, but he did not document his riding a horse on this day. Does anybody know anything about Parker? He had tuberculosis. How long does he live after this fight? 7 months. Yep. How old is he when he starts this fight? 47. Is he an average guy?
Yes.
He would have been anyone sitting in here, perhaps. Maybe a little bit more notable in the town, but a town guy. Did he fight in the French and Indian War? Who said yes? Be very, very careful with me. There is no documentation whatsoever that John Parker ever fought in the French and Indian War. The only bit of documentation about him is that in 1759 he was issued one of the old cruddy dirty bayonets that had been laying around in the town. That's all we know about him. So you got to be careful. This history stuff can bite you in the tail. You don't want to romanticize what these folks do. You want to find out what they did and defend that. This is the only primary documentation of what happened at the Green. And this was done by whom? Amos Doolittle. And when did he do it? About 6 weeks after the fight. He interviewed people and he walked the site. That's all he did. He was not an eyewitness. So, but this is his engraving based on what he gathered from talking to folks. That's it. Wow. Doesn't do much for you, does it? You have no idea if it's accurate. You have nothing. You just don't get it. Now, does that look like a fair fight? Remember, it's like 700 Brits against a few guys on the Green, right? That's not 700 Brits against a few guys on the Green, is it? What does it look like? It's about 60 guys of Brits and about the same number of John Parker's company. And that's probably exactly correct. This was not an unmatched fight. Who fired first? I'm the world's smartest man. I know. And it wasn't on the Green. And how do I know? Because the British officers, many of you may have been officers in the military. What happens after something happens? What do you got to do?
Write a report.
Write a report. And do you think these guys didn't do that? Absolutely they did. The British officers, 2 of them, documented about a quarter of a mile down Mass Ave, 2 times, some American jumped from behind a stone wall, leveled his piece, pulled the trigger, and it snapped. And it flashed in the pan. What's that? A misfire. Or was it not loaded and just primed? In other words, was somebody being a provocateur? Doesn't really matter. Twice that occurred to the column. Was the column loaded before that happened? No. That precipitated Smith/Pitcairn to tell the British column to load their muskets. Without that happening, these guys would have been unloaded on the Green. And we wouldn't be talking about this event. So I do know who caused that fight on the Green because it's documented. All right. Now, what do we know about Parker's revenge? Socratic question. What do we know about Parker's revenge? That's almost the right answer. Virtually nothing. There is, and I'm going to tell you the entire bit of data from which I and a bunch of other folks was able to solve this so what, who cares murder mystery from 19 April 1775. In the middle of the forenoon, Captain Parker and some of his company marched to the bounds of Lincoln. We're all done. That's it. Tough to write a TV movie with that. How far is it from here to the bounds of Lincoln if you were walking? Anybody know? Anybody ever try it?
3 miles?
3 miles.
Let's call it 3 miles. It isn't quite, but let's call it 3 miles. How fast can you do that? Marching. Fair enough. So if you went in the middle of the forenoon, when did you get there? At least, maybe 11:30ish. When did the fight at the North Bridge happen? 9. I'll help you out. 9. What time did they leave to march back?
10.
No, it was 12, because they had to wait for the guys that went all the way to Barrett's Farm to come back. So they didn't leave Concord Bridge till 12. So Parker's already sitting at the site of this unknown Parker's Revenge by 11:30, and the Brits haven't even marched out of Concord until noon. So there's one of our first bits of data, is Parker's had plenty of time to get there. How many people were hurt/killed on the Green?
8.
8 what?
Dead.
Who said 10 dead? I like 10 better. Who likes 8 wounded?
That sounds good.
That wouldn't be too bad, but it's 9. Did you know it's 9? No, you didn't know it's 9. Do you know why you don't know it's 9? Because one of the men wounded on the green was expunged. Why? What would make you today in your society ignore the... You must have asked this question at some point in your lives, many of you. Why would you join the military and stand in front of a bullet? Volunteer to stand in front of a bullet. What would make you do that? Is that a question that's reasonable for veterans to have been posed to them? I think so. I had that discussion with my wife back in '71. So Parker loses 9 guys, and here's some primary documentation. Jonas Clark. Who's Jonas Clark? Your minister. The only church in town. He enumerates all of the wounded. And there's a guy named John Bacon that you never have heard of who's wounded on the green. The 9th guy. It turned out, and we'd have no idea whether I played Jedediah Monroe, who's wounded on the green, and I go out with Parker in the afternoon, and I'm killed at Parker's Revenge. Did John Bacon go on that trip? And what kind of leadership would take you? You've been wounded. Let's go. We're doing it again. Really? What kind of... You got my... sometimes I get speechless stuff, but you get the idea. What kind of leadership needs to exist to pull that off? Bacon may have been one, we don't know. But Bacon had a weakness. Apparently, back then it occurred more than we like to admit, but it really took an outstanding example to catch the notice of society. Apparently abused his wife. Not a thing you want to be proud of, but apparently he did. And he was jailed. Of course, there was no jail in Lexington, so where did they jail him? Concord, exactly. They did not disarm him, and he committed suicide with his jackknife. That's why he's been expunged from the records. And you'll never hear about a veteran who gave up his blood on that green named John Bacon. So now you have another fact that virtually nobody knows about this fight on this green. So, what's this? Looks to me like sort of the boundaries of the battle road from Lechmere Point, where it starts, all the way to North Bridge, and then back. They didn't go to Lechmere Point again. They went over to Charleston. Percy decided not to go back whence they came because he figured, I'm not going to make it across the river. I'm going to hang a sharp left turn, and that faked out everybody. What we're going to be interested in is a little bend in the road right there. So, you guys are fairly familiar with this, although I am unimpressed with your knowledge, okay? What sometimes bothers me is you guys know more about Northbridge than perhaps about Lexington and that stupid poem, right? That stupid poem. Non-historical, bad poem to boot. The British retreat. What was that like? Anybody like to be a Brit? Well, we were all British back then, remember? We were all good and loyal subjects to the king. Another quick fact. When was the last time George Washington toasted King George III?
July 2nd.
Cute. Okay, I'm going to remember you. It actually was January 6th, 1776. When was our fight here? 75. When did Washington take over command of the Continental Army? July 3rd, 1775. So many months later, he still stood up and toasted George III.
Would Shirka's mother please come to the reference desk?
Am I done? Is that it? Miriam's Corner. That's when the first Boston Marathon really takes place. Okay, by the way, we refused Patriots Day. It's not Marathon Day. This is the first Boston Marathon. Make no mistake about it. The British troops, this circuit, and if you're light infantry, you're constantly going back and forth orthogonal to the line of march, pushing the colonists away. You're a flanker. You probably did 40 miles inside 24 hours. Volunteers to do that today? Over or under 50 notwithstanding? Miriam's Corner, between 5 and 7 British soldiers were killed there. And unknown Americans. We almost never know when an American is killed on the battle road. We have some insight, again, from British officer accounts where the Brits were killed, but not where our guys. Today, I'm an R guy. By the way, what am I going to be doing, Linda, at about 1 o'clock on Saturday? I am Major John Mitchell on horseback, riding up and down the battle road, directing the fight from the other side. So look for me if you feel like it. The Bloody Angle, we hope to be our next archaeological effort. People jump on B.J. Dunn and try to get him to do that. That's where that one is. That's another fairly undocumented site, but guess who was there? Concord, Reading, Framingham, Sudbury, Woburn. They all coagulated at the Bloody Angle. And then we get the Parker's Revenge, which is the point of our discussion here. Not an entirely accurate. I think the road is a tad more crowded with the column, and I'm not sure there are too many cows floating around at the time the fight is going on here. But this is somebody's version and Bob Morse is the president of Friends, again, ended up raising $330,000 for this effort, okay? So it started with my 10 and goes to 330, so attaboy to those folks. This is the Tabitha Nelson house right here that existed at the time. It's no longer in existence. There's her barn, which is a fabrication because we've been looking for that stupid barn for 7 years and still can't find it. This is the granite outcropping that you'll see on the Battle Road as you come across here. And there's a bridge about where I'm standing that was, we think, fairly important to the fight. There are the crew, the first yahoos to go out there and start chopping down invasive species and other stuff. And guess where they come from? Lexington. It's the Lexington Minutemen. The vast majority of those folks are Lexington Minutemen. And some wives and hangers-on. So I think that's me and my navy blueberries sitting there right there in the front. This is one of the reenactments that you'll see again. This commences about 1 o'clock again on Saturday this year. Again, this is the Rocky Outcropping. And for a Navy guy, that would be me, I said, that's the great ambush spot. You overlook the road, they'd have to crawl up, and that's the spot. How many artifacts do you think we found on that Rocky Outcropping? Yeah. So the world's smartest man, uh-oh. What's wrong with that concept? So, in order to get the government to back any archaeological question or effort, you have to ask a question. So I'm the guy that came up with, where was Parker's fight and what happened? Can the archaeology tell us anything about what happened at this fight? And then there's some obvious things like, there's rocks and trees. Well, wait a minute, are there any witness trees left? No. Long gone. So understanding the landscape by looking at any of the flora, you're not going to learn a ton. The geology, that may have something meaningful. Now, any ground pounder infantry dudes here, or infantry officers, or anything like that? Anybody want to admit that? No? Well, at the military academy and other places, a whole bunch of folks have been working on this. This is sort of not invented. We've been using this for 5,000 years, but nobody ever sort of wrote it down. But this is what, when you go into action on foot, it's not clear you can do that when you're on a ship. I mean, the ocean, for all intents and purposes, is flat. Key terrain. What did it look like? Remember that stupid rocky outcropping that the Navy guy thinks is a great place for an ambush? Observation in fields of fire. Once you get to this key terrain that you are now committed to fighting on, what can you do for observation, and how are you going to concentrate your fire? How are you going to support your men for maneuver? Concealment and cover. Then obstacles. And finally, your avenues of approach and escape, by the way. So it's called COCOA. This is now the strategy that's been used in battlefield archaeology, what's called conflict archaeology. It's now sort of its own scholarly subject. And we went through this. We adopted this as our goal. We looked at it, and as we go on, you'll see some of the stuff that we've had to go through. There are essentially 3 steps that Meg directed us to do. And the first is, and we've discussed some of it, what does writing tell us? Go do some research. Before you go out and start digging up stuff, kind of figure out if you're digging in the right place, if anybody was there, what did the land look like, what it was used for back then. And we did that. And that's how we know, because I'm basically giving you just about everything that was written down at the time, with the exception of some of the land use stuff. We have the deeds. We have a pretty reasonable understanding from the mid-17th century, so that would be 1650s, onward of what that land was used for, who owned it, when the buildings were put up, when they were taken down and moved or moved, et cetera, et cetera. Then we started to go out in our field investigations. We got folks from Harvard, Brandeis, BU, William and Mary, some other folks that were experts in flora, fauna, geology, migratory birds. Boy, that was a big winner for me, but that mattered. All these folks were saying, well, this is part of the context that Parker was operating inside. And finally, after the field operations, when we get all that stuff done and we put shovels in the ground, now what did we think we discovered? What does the data tell us? These are some of these slides that are showing up are some original documents that exist in goofy places like Concord, like Lexington, and the records office here in town. The maintenance department's got stuff that the library doesn't, and vice versa. It's all over the town, but you can find records that are fairly interesting. Some of these are 19th century. This is 21st century version of what the lots looked like from the 18th century. Let's see. The problem is I'm not sure why she chose this, because what we care about is right here, and it's kind of disappointing that we didn't have it on that one, but that's the way it goes. This is a woman that did some documentation, Barbara Donahue, in 1992, and it's very frustrating sometimes what our government does. I'm sure I can share that frustration with you guys. They did some shoveled test pits around. They actually found the foundation of Tabitha Nelson's house, and they didn't even document it. They did not take coordinates. They did all this work that you paid for and then buried it up. Thank you. I need to know where Tabitha Nelson's house is. It's in the middle of the fight. Was it a tactical obstacle? Did we need to send, if I were a British officer, send somebody to clear that house? And I don't know where the stupid house is. That was frustrating. So we had to go reinvent stuff that we'd already paid for. Now, also, Barbara was fortunate enough, in 2006, I believe it was, the Air Force, because of 9/11, moved their fence. And in moving the fence, in an archaeologically sensitive ground, they had to bring in archaeologists. What did they find? On the northwest corner, they found 3 musket balls, a shoe buckle. They found a mold for a musket ball, but it is a 19th century one. Why it's out there, I have no idea, but it's too late. And that's what started us. They found 3 musket balls. Wait a minute. What is going on here? And again, it's in the northwest corner of this site, as far away from that stupid rocky outcropping as you can get before you get onto the Air Force Base. And what did the Air Force do? No offense to your Air Force guys. They didn't care. They were going to throw the stuff away. They didn't, trust me. A friend of mine heard about it, called me, and we went over there, and we started sorting through the debris and said, no, this is meaningful, this, and this, and now we own those, personally. The park now owns those musket balls. Because of that, we said, there's something here. There is a story, and nobody's following up on it. Anybody ever hear of the Little Bighorn? Yeah, you know that one, don't you? Well, the archaeologist that invented archaeology at Little Bighorn and did it for 23 years is a guy named Doug Scott. Guess who was our godfather during all of this? That guy. He flew out here 3 times, and he was really cute. He said, 1 musket ball is hunting, 2 musket balls is a fight. And you've got 3. Let's go. Now, Doug is quite a guy. He testified at Saddam Hussein's trial. He's been to Croatia, Slovenia, Bosnia, all those places doing battlefield archaeology with metal detecting, and has discovered massacre sites, and he's quite a guy. Metal detectorists are looked at by archaeologists as something worse than the devil. That's now what I am. I've never touched one before this event. And remember I said I wasn't allowed to touch dirt at all because I'm not an archaeologist. My first attempt at understanding this was a class in Pennsylvania looking for a French and Indian War fort. They had found 6,000 artifacts at that site. How many of them related to the fort? 0. Not one. And how did they find these artifacts? They set up a 100-meter square test grid, and every meter intersection they dug a pit. Found nothing. We went in with our metal detectors as a class. What did we find in the first 15 minutes? 2 musket balls and a button, a gas-back button, which is absolutely declarative of being a 1750s to 1760s military site. And all of these archaeologists thought we were defiling ground, went, ooh. And how much damage did we do to the ground? Nothing. You make a little hole, as opposed to a test pit that are always, not always, often a meter by a meter. The archaeologists started, whoa. And how much did this cost us? 15 minutes with 30 people. I mean, we had a lot of folks, but it was incredibly inexpensive vis-a-vis what they did. And the knowledge we uncovered was exactly their answer in 15 minutes. It was way to the east of where they thought it was. In fact, we're pretty sure there's a farmhouse, which is, I think, in the middle of the fort. And they said, no, it wouldn't be there. That's the kind of, you have to sort of hit somebody between the eyes to get their attention to what's common sense at sometimes. Now you do in the state of Massachusetts have to hire an archaeological company. This is a guy who is spectacular, our buddy Nate from, and of course you had to hire an out-of-state one. These guys are from Rhode Island, a professional archaeology lab out of Providence. And now we have actually got some data. We've started to document, I see all these red dots, and this is a screenshot, I'm sorry about that, but all these sites, these are all houses inside the national park in the area we're trying to get into. These have been built from the 19th century, well, some of them are actually the 18th century witness structures, but 19th century onward. Look at that mess. And by the way, this is the giant parking lot that our government built. And this is the Battle Road. There's absolutely a possibility that musket fire ended up in that parking lot, but not anymore. Sir?
Just as a reference, can you point out where Mass Ave and 2A are?
2A is right here. That's 2A, this is east, that's west.
And where's Mass Ave? Or is it even on the...
Oh, no, this is, well, the bounds of Lincoln. I'm glad where's the bounds of Lincoln? The bounds of Lincoln is this line. So here's Lexington, there's Lincoln.
Okay.
So this is the dead western part of the town. Now, are you guys familiar with the visitor center on Route 2A? Sure. So that's right about there, I think it is. And that's the parking lot, which of course is what? A god-awful quarter-mile hike. Nope, not going to answer that question. Where's that? That's Hartwell Tavern, which is in Lincoln. That's one of the best rangers they got. If you ever complain about spending your tax dollars, don't complain about the money that goes to that guy. After all, we're here because of those little kids, aren't we? Let's talk a little bit about the landscape. What was it that we're looking for? Now look at the date of this map. This is 1930 map. It's an aerial shot from 1930. And that dotted yellow circle is what we're interested in. Wow. 2A doesn't look like 2A, does it? Because it wasn't. It was 2. That's the original Route 2. So it's going through here. I don't know. Again, some of us, do you guys remember what 2A or the Battle Road used to look like? Remember the car dealerships and the ice cream and the real estate and all that good stuff in there, and the restaurants? Well, that starts in about this period. But what we're looking at is right about here. Here's the rocky outcropping. And you see this straight line right there? That's an 18th century pathway that's still there. And look at the change. This is all granite and crud, but look at, that's different, isn't it? It's just different. Why? And we think we understand. Vegetation, indeed. So what do you think? And Tabitha Nelson's house would have been right about there, I think. So what do you think that lot was?
That center one's a point.
Is it? I didn't want to incinerate somebody by doing that. No, it isn't. That was the on. Oh, the center one. Good work. Okay. Wow, high-tech stuff. So the bridge, which we never found, there's a water feature that runs right there, and there's a culvert there. That's where I think the bridge was, but Meg and I have this content. She thinks it was destroyed when they built Airport Road, which is not on here, is it? Because there's no Hanscom Air Force Base yet, not 1930. The next map. Ooh, 1960. So where's the bridge? I don't know, but look at how it's been built up here. This is Thomas Nelson Sr.'s house. Tabitha's is right about there. Now there is one wicked cool thing. Do you see this field and that boundary? That is an 18th century tree line boundary. It's still there because of what the extraction of minerals and such from the soil. The field is different from the woods, and it's never recovered. So that's kind of whizzy. Anyway, there's the stone wall. Tabitha Nelson's barn runs across that stone wall. That is an 18th century feature. Now, why you would build a barn that straddles a stone wall is beyond me, but have we found that stupid barn? Nope. So there's only really two questions then. Did it get destroyed? Was it right there? Because after all, her house is only there. Was it right there and it's under the road? Or Meg wonders whether she shared it with her father, but that's stupid because if he sold the land to another family, they end up with a house with no barn. That's not going to fly in the 18th century farming lifestyle. So the park buys basically is invented in 1959, and a whole host of land is given there with a whole host of 19th and 20th century buildings that are all going to be destroyed. As you probably know, there's only one building left in our area. I told the ranger, don't cut that tree down. That's a bad idea. And the ranger cut it down and sliced the power line that went to that one last house. The guy was not too happy. And I just walked away. And here's the site from essentially modern times. This is about when we started the project and Meg joined up. And you can see now the red spots are now the only buildings left. So you remember that one that probably had 25 or 30 red spots? Now we have what, half a dozen? This is the original vernal pool that you can still see there. As you walk to the visitor center, you walk past that. This thing seems to be directional when I turn my head. Anyway. So we've gotten rid of a lot of that sprawl and spread. Hanscom is probably never going to open up that gate that's back there, but we sure hope so, or hope not. That's the last standing house, and this spot of land was up for grabs, and that's what some of the $330,000 went to. It is now national park land, so nobody can develop that. So we've saved a good bit of this area. Look at that. 6 acres house lot. Quit claim to Josiah in 1779. So Tabitha loses her right to her house in 1779. It's sold to her dad. I think in 1781 they moved the house, so it disappears. But that lot is her house is right about there. And there's that elusive barn that we cannot find. That's frustrating. What did we want to say here? Okay, from the Lincoln Public Band, there's the Hosmer copied in 1772, because was the Lincoln-Lexington boundary then the same one we think of it is today? And the answer is sorta. It's close enough. We're not going to get too wrapped around the axle over that. But then that question, see, Nelson's Bridge, we know about that because it's named right there. This is a Cocoa thing, this is an obstacle. You are now crossing a water feature, you've got a column of 700 guys. How many guys can cross that bridge at once? Not 700. So you've got a choke point and you're going into a corner. Ugh. This is now, we're starting to put together the question of what the heck happened at Parker's Revenge. Now there's Thomas Nelson Jr.'s house. This is the only picture we have of it. And there's Tabitha's house. So they moved it and attached it to her dad's house. And now it is since long gone. It was, as you can see then, I'm not sure how stable it was then, but it's now gone. Now, this is one of those questions. I have to do what Meg wrote down, but I disagree with her. Do you see how they put Tabitha's house sort of sloping down? Well, if you go to the site, it's mirror imaged because she did build the house on a rocky outcropping, but it's mirror imaged. It would have, her house would have looked like this going down because that's the only way it would have fit as a puzzle. So I'm convinced she's got this wrong, but you know, I already got into one fight with her, so I'm going to let her have this one.
Today, we're out with the Lincoln Minutemen volunteers from the actual reenactment group, and we're clearing the site.
This is what it used to look like,
What we're
guys.
looking at here is where we believe Tabitha Nelson's house was located. It was
That's Meg, by the way.
In the 1960s, in the late 1960s, by a fellow named Snow, but unfortunately, he didn't map as accurately as we would like his excavations, so we don't actually know where the foundations of that house is, or even if it was the house, based on his interpretations. So what we're doing is we're setting up to do a non-invasive survey with geophysical survey instruments, which include ground-penetrating radar, magnetometry, and conductivity, to name a few.
That's my
And
beautiful
what
rear
we're
end, by the
having
way.
to do is clear all of the brush from the ground surface, because with those geophysical instruments, and with the metallic surveys that we'll be conducting after the geophysical surveys, we have to have contact with the ground surface, so flush right on the ground surface. Also, it's interesting to note that when we study the historic documentation, we know that much of this area in the Minuteman National Park was actually pasture land or meadows and not full-grown forests like we have today. This is all new growth after the 1770s, after the landscape had been cleared and
That's
farmed,
the foundation to
grazed
Tabitha's
with
house.
animals of all
Note the
sorts.
phone pole right through the middle of it. That is frustrating. Again, nobody sort of knew this documentation where the house was, so luck would have it, they destroyed a bunch of good stuff. You can still go out there today, and there are 18th and 17th century pottery shards and pieces of brick from her house. You can just pick them up off the ground. So, what are we doing? If some of this stuff is boring, I got it, but it's absolutely meaningful in order to, what are the two questions? So what, who cares? We've got to understand, come up with the answer to this mystery. So these guys, that's Meg's husband, got a 3D laser scanning. So we did a 3D survey of the entire area. Digital laser survey. Why? Guess what you can remove when you do that digitally? You can make all the trees go away. So all you see is the physical layout of the ground that more than likely Parker would have seen. The geophysical survey, that's me. I'm in a lot of this stuff, okay? This is all about Bill. I'm running the ground penetrating radar sled. There's a metallic effort, but we've also did proton magnetometer. You've probably heard about that stuff. The guys at sea that go out looking for cannons and shipwrecks using proton magnetometers. You can use that in ground stuff as well as electric conductivity or resistivity. It's the same question when you do vehicles IR. So you're trying to see whether this ground is showing some sort of anomaly, some disturbance in either the magnetic or the electric field that's in the ground that says, aha, a human did something here. And then finally, we did do some test pits because that's, hey, when you're dealing with archaeologists, they have to put a shovel in the ground. So we did some test pits as well. What do you think we found in them?
Nothing.
Almost true. one pit on the other side of the road on the line, we were looking for the darn barn. We found a burn area. It was a hearth, but it doesn't look like it was attached to a building. So we'll be darned if we know what that is. It could have been an outdoor forge, but we didn't find any slag. But it was clearly purpose-built. There was a hearth, and there was a bunch of carbon there. So that is another one of the questions we're going to try to answer that we don't have today. Some of you may recognize this guy. He's not a Lexingtonian, but he used to be head of the Historical Society here. That's Bill Poole. So that rang a bell with somebody here, I guess. Yeah. And here is this digital survey we did from a laser point of view. So we can now walk down the Battle Road. By the way, there's where maybe the bridge was, but I'm telling you, the bridge is right there. Because that's where the culvert is. So we can now go and digitally, you see those ghosts? You can actually do this with people there. Actually, this is coming the wrong direction. We're heading now towards the Rocky, we're heading east. And there's the Rocky outcropping. So we now are able to remove these trees and understand a good deal more what the British troops and Parker's men were attempting to do on that day. By the way, most of this was given to us gratis. Okay, now look at that. That's LiDAR. So one of the cool things is if somebody bothers to pay for it, you can take aviation-mounted radar with a certain frequency and shoot straight down. It's a combination of laser, I believe, merged with a radar scan as well. So you take digital and you can take analog and kind of smoosh it together. And we have now removed everything that grows. So this is a picture of the dirt. And that's pretty whizzy because there's the Rocky outcropping. There's that pathway that I told you was the 18th century when it's still there. This is the 18th century water feature that is still there. There is the stone wall. There is that hole in the ground, and right there is the telephone pole. So that's Tabitha Nelson's place. So you got the orientation now? I think this is one of the whizziest things we did, is that you can now God's eye what Parker was seeing and Colonel Smith and Major Pitcairn were seeing from the surface. This is the original Battle Road, and this is Airport Road, and Hanscom is down here. So now you can see my personal conundrum. Here I go. This has got to be Parker's Revenge, because you just nail these guys as they come across. Well, we are smart enough to know, and the slides will show that as we go forward, that Army guys know stuff too, and maybe they know a tad more about ambushes than some Navy jerk. Yep, apparently they do. So the guy looked at it. He's got 2 Purple Hearts. He's a Vietnam vet. He's a really good guy, works for the park. He said, there's your ambush site right there. You get below the military crest, and you now can see right down the access of the road. I go, okay. We don't know anything, though, so okay. Just keep that in mind. Of course, I'm not sure why I had to give you all the great stuff before that, but again, this is that right here is the boundary of that tree line that I thought that was pretty cool. Now, see where the drainage is put? So why in heaven's name would the bridge be there? By the way, this does not show up over here. This one does. So this one goes underground. And it may have been disturbed, it's not clear, but I'm still convinced the bridge was there, it isn't there. So, yeah. And there's Tabitha's house. So there we are doing some of the other stuff, the ground resistivity or conductivity and the proton magnetometer. So these are folks from the National Park. These guys, oops, sorry about that. These guys, you lied to me. Both of them keep advancing. How do I undo it? Ed. All right, there we go. So this guy's from the local region who hated our metallic survey guys, namely metal detectors. And now several of us are specially designated as sort of avocational cohort. We have now been to Montana, Gettysburg, Florida, Virginia, Pennsylvania, I think I said that, helping the national parks for free. We pay our own way, show up with our own gear, and we give them information they could have gotten in no other way. And by the way, that's been one of the most rewarding things, is here we are, people that they were ready to throw in jail, and now they can't live without us. There's a lesson there. This is the dig looking for, remember we don't know where Tabitha's place was? This is digging for Tabitha's place. And that was the worst, because it was covered up with this rocky crud fill from the building of the road. And going through it was young man's work. I didn't do any of this stuff. It would have killed me. So we had young folks doing this. And there we found the corner. This rock, same rock, is the corner stone to her foundation. So we recovered it. The only evidence we have that that is true is there was a handwritten drawing of what the rock looked like. So we compared this to the got it. And now we're going to go to the physical evidence. Now, why they didn't pick my picture on horseback, I don't know. But I'm pretty irritated, as you can tell. But Saturday, that'll be me instead of that guy. And that's a lot of fun, by the way. Riding a horse on the original battle road, does something to me anyway. Gear. I think one of the things that attracted us to doing this is, you know, in the military you got gear. We had gear, lots of gear. And you can see us sort of, these are some of the folks that we got from all over the place. Doggone it. Archaeologists from New York, there's Bill Poole. These are the folks from PAL, local region, another couple of guys. Doug Scott right there, he's the godfather of what we're doing from Montana. And you can see we did three field sessions. The other guy you want to thank is this character. I don't know why she put this one in there, but that's Joel Boy, a long time Concord resident who actually lived on a house next to Hartwell Tavern that burned down in the 60s. Not the Samuel Hartwell Tavern that burned as well, that the skeleton is still there, but he lived on the battle road and got the disease. And he's now another one of our sacred, he can go dig where we need to. He likes gear, he loves getting kitted up. You can tell. And that's us actually doing real work. And you can see how close we are to the parking lot. That's the parking lot right there. Now, he is within about 2 feet of finding an 18th century button. Was it from the fight? We're never going to know, but the material, the style, and the size all say absolutely could have been there. So you know what I think, don't you? Absolutely. The chances that it's a drop button from one of the militia or minute companies that either was probably not in Parker, it was probably some of the guys chasing the British column after Parker's fight. Now, I got to do it because you wives will understand, but that is the long-suffering, 47 years my wife, who was, guess who found more musket balls than anybody else? Yep. So I have to tell you a good story because it is about my wife, but we had we're trying to raise the money. We had the folks from the Civil War Battlefield Protection Society there, and they're the ones that came up with a big chunk of the money. And one of them was in the field while we were looking for stuff, and one of the archaeologists was describing what we're doing. He says, boy, it sure would be good if we could find a musket ball now. So my wife's a very, very shy, unassuming lady, and she's down there digging a hole, and she turns around and says, oh, you mean like this? And I like to think that might have closed the deal right there. And she just had one. It was just one of those things. Anyway.
She planted it.
She could have been. You can see. It is pretty cool. These are the 4 guys that found 95% of the musket balls. I think we were the ones that are, and now we're the qualified folks. That's Ed Hurley from Reading. Used to teach school at Malden Catholic, I think, for a bajillion years. Me, Joel, and my wife. Now the cool thing about what Crean's got there is this musket ball, it's tough to see in that picture, but there's a 90-degree dent in it. That's a groove right there. it perfectly matches the rock that's right above where she found it. Now, is that a bridge too far? Maybe, maybe not. But again, the romanticism of the site, absolutely. So was there one of Parker's militia hiding behind there? I don't know. This is a sample of the first, I believe this is, most of these are first season finds. But here you've got 12 of the musket balls that we discovered. The reason I say that is that 3 of these I think are the Air Force ones, and 9 were ones we found in the first effort. Now there's some very interesting things here that you need to. That says dropped. These all say fired. What's the difference between that one and that one? Well, that's a setup question. It's very difficult for you to understand that looking at this. But think of the physics of firing a musket ball. How do you tell a fired one that maybe doesn't hit much and bounces off of something soft, like even going through a human, and doesn't distort, versus one that's just dropped on the ground? And why do you care? Socratic questions. What do you think? Let's go. Help me start analyzing this data. Get into this. Come on.
Elongated somehow?
What is?
The ball that's been fired.
The ball has been fired. I will change your question. Has been distorted. How do you like that?
I agree.
So think of how compressible is lead, given that no metal is really compressible, but how malleable is lead? High or low? High malleability. So if you have this very strong sort of equally spread force hitting a sphere, what's going to happen to that malleable sphere of lead? Semisphere, because these are cast in the 18th century and they're not pure spheres. What's going to happen to it? It's going to distort. How's it going to distort?
A little bit egg-shaped.
It's going to get egg-shaped. That's exactly correct. And what will keep it from extorting exponentially?
Side of the barrel.
The side of the barrel. So you get this equatorial scarring that will always be, given that the musket ball remotely fits the barrel. I mean, if you've got a barrel this big and a musket ball this big, you won't have it. But if it fits, you will always get an equatorial ridge. And these all have them. In fact, there it is. You can see the top and bottom of it right there. This one is the only one we found that did not have it. So that's the only drop musket ball. Keep that in mind. Then you get that little rascal. That is musket ball number 41A. George truly found that. I was told, don't dig these final things. They're across the road. They didn't matter. And I said, but they're perfect. I got to dig them. So they let me dig 2 out of the 3. The last one I dug was 41A. And the reason it matters, it's a skip. It's way beyond the site of the fight. So this one hit a rock and bounced across the airport road into a field over near Thomas Nelson's place. It's the only one we found there. There it is. There's an amazing amount of history. So, what have we discovered here? We've discovered it's 2:35. Does anybody? Are we okay here?
Yep.
I mean, I can stop right now. I can come up with an ending, but there may be some more interesting stuff. Probably I got to stop in 25 minutes because I have someplace I have to go. But so, what have we discovered? We discovered 32 musket balls. How many musket balls were fired? Isn't that a question you would want to know? I mean, so what was our recovery rate? High or low? Well, a lot of that, well, don't know, do we? But that's a question. How long was the fight? If it was a long fight, you'd expect lots of musket balls. If it was a short fight, you'd find a few musket balls. How many guys were in the fight? If it was 300 guys, you'd see a lot of musket balls. If it wasn't very many guys, so what do we know about Parker's company?
A couple hundred.
No, what did I say? In the middle of the forenoon, Parker and some of his company marched to the bounds of Lincoln. Define some. Beats me. Well, how many were on the green?
About 200.
You're going back into dumb territory. I don't like that. So you got to go back to primary documentation. We have no idea how many men Parker had on the green. But one guy stepped out of the green, out of the line, that Parker or the sergeant or the lieutenant was forming on the morning, and counted, and he came up with 43. Now, that wasn't when the fight occurred. So the next question is, how many more? I am convinced it's fewer than 70 American guys like us were on that green. So if Parker took some of the company, give me a number that you like. I'd go 40 to 50. Now the next question is, how many Brits were out there? Well, I think we'll start to come to that. Again, I get ahead of the slides. I get too excited, I'm afraid. But there is the large S. Why are some of these in bags and some of these are not in bags? Again, there's data everywhere you look. You just got to ask some questions, and some of them are maybe a little subtle here. But why are those in bags?
To preserve it.
No. Well, yes, but no. There's dirt in those bags. And what can you do today with modern chemistry? You can look for hemoglobin. What is hemoglobin? Anybody biologically oriented? What's it made of?
Did it hit anybody?
Iron. Does iron go away over the centuries? No. So you can start to understand whether any of these hit somebody. So these are in sterile bags with an associated soil sample. So we're going to be able at some point to try to see whether there's any hemoglobin. Now the next question is it human hemoglobin or did it hit a cow? That's another question, okay? Now that they've got some long chain molecule stuff, they can even tell the species. That's going to be kind of expensive. I don't know if we can do that in the near term. But that's why these are bagged. We're going to try to decide whether these are just hidden rocks or whether some of them were a tad more nasty. These are some of the other cool finds that we got. This is a fascinating story. My wife and I went to one of Meg's pitches at Concord, and this button, I dug it out of the ground, but I didn't find it. Another metal detector's found it. I pulled it out of the ground and went, whoa, this is cool. This is a hunting dog, a bridge, some Chinese type trees, and a windmill. That's the design on this thing. So what did my wife do? At midnight, we're driving back from Concord. She's on the internet. She finds that button for sale from a collector in Pennsylvania. At 12:01, I bought that button for $29.95 and brought it back and matched it to that one. It came from the same mold. Now, when was it cast? Don't know that. We're trying to get some experts. It is an English button that is not made in the USA, that's for sure. But that's one of those fascinating questions, because these guys came out in their Sunday best. They did not come out as half-baked farmers in junk clothes with tears and rips. No, no, no. So that came off of a waistcoat that's a tad fancier. Coat button, that's the one Joel found. I absolutely think that's early 19th century. Is possible, but I entirely doubt it. There's another button, I'm not sure why it's on here. Halfpenny, George III, 1775. Ooh, it's got some possibility. I found this. It's a Spanish half real, solid silver, 1781. So somebody probably in the Nelson family dropped that out plowing one day. Why? Do you know how much money that was? That was some serious nickels back then. So why you would have that in your pocket plowing, I can't say. But hey, now you can't find that with a metal detector because it's not metallic, but it was right next to the button. Okay, we'll take it. And this shoe buckle was found in the Air Force thing, but that is absolutely an R period, time of the fight shoe buckle. Well, science is a wonderful thing. Oh, there's 41A again. That's me, Bill Poole, the Ranger, Joel Boyd, Doug Scott, and, oh shoot, who is that? Yeah, we're measuring these things up, and then we bring in a guy named Brucker. That's Morris from the president of the Friends, David Wood, the curator over at the Concord Museum, and this is the guy that invented the portable X-ray fluorescence. So here we are at the metallic spectrum of each of these musket balls. This is silver versus rhodium. You're trying to find out what these things were made of. Could we determine that this musket ball is British and this one is non-British? You hesitate to say American, but you can say non-British ordnance. And that's what this, all donated. Great guys to have done this. So we're now, each of the musket balls has a elemental signature with it. The reason David Wood is there is he brought 3 musket balls that were found at the North Bridge. And guess what they had in them? Silver. None of the others had silver in them. So we're thinking, why did the musket balls at North Bridge have silver? Is that because Concord was a wealthier town? My suspicion is there may have been smelting runoff in the river that over the centuries these musket balls made chemical contact with. That's a hypothesis that needs to be tested seriously. But the fact is those 3 musket balls had significant silver in them and none of the others did. And they're documented as 18th century from the North Bridge, so we took them to be fight balls. This rhodium thing, that's because the sensor has rhodium in it, so it always shows up, so ignore that. So now that we had a whole lot of the data from the musket balls, the landscape, some people, we then got some real live smart people, some of them I hate to say smarter than me, and we brought them together in a military tactical review. We used COCOA, remember that from the beginning. What was the terrain, any obstacles, concealment and cover to the fighters, observation of fields of fire, and how the heck do you get there and get away. All together now, that's 41A, my favorite musket ball. And we brought them into the National Park for a meeting, and there we are, just having this round table. Each of us experts got up and said something meaningful that we thought would have impacted the fight. And there's Meg, sort of coordinating it all. And now we've got something really to chew on. There's Meg putting the stupid bridge in the road. It should be over here. And look at the dots. Dot, 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 dot. What does that look like to you? Yeah, but what musket balls and what sort of geometric arrangement?
It's a battle line.
Kind of a linear feature, doesn't it look like? From a statistical point of view, you've got a line there. And then you see all these up here. And if you regress the line, you're going to get what I just drew. So you have more of an arc. And what's your field of fire? Right down there. And guess what that one is? 41A. Okay? There's the rocky outcropping. And what do you see on the rocky outcropping, as we've said before? Zorch. Nothing. So now, and by the way, it's kind of frustrating. You see the blue ones, but these white ones are now interpreted to be among the blue. What is the difference between white, blue, and red, you might ask? That is a Socratic question, but I don't expect you to know the answer to that one. These are, the blue ones are extremely small caliber musket balls relative to the sample size. So these are going to be 50 to 55 caliber. These are going to be maybe 55 to 60, a little bit bigger. These red ones are going to be 64, 65, 69 caliber. What is the difference among those? Somebody tell me.
Brits versus Colonial.
Exactly. Which one are Brits?
The bigger higher calorie.
The bigger ones. So what did I just do to you? You guys are so stupid. I sucker punched you. Because if the big ones were fired by the Brits, and the assertion is, this is Parker, these are the big ones, and those are the little ones. No, I did say it right, didn't I? Yes. These are somewhat indeterminate. Now, you see what's right there? That's a white one. Ooh, and guess what that one is? The dropped one. So, keep that in mind, because now we're starting to coagulate into the so what, who cares, because of what happened. We're now getting the answer to our murder mystery. Now, why is it a murder mystery? Somebody's got to die, right? Who died here? Unknown British. There is no mention of any British soldiers being killed here. That doesn't mean they weren't. It just there's no mention of it. But 2 Americans were killed here. And that's the murder mystery. One of them, his name was Wyman. He actually paid taxes for a couple of years in Lexington, but he was probably more a Woburnish guy than a Lexingtonish guy. And the other guy that died there was Jedediah Monroe. The guy that I portray, wounded in the green in the morning, goes out with Parker in the afternoon and is killed right here. Now, I've heard this name, which bothers me no end. Who's that guy? Some of you know who that guy is because I've heard you say his name.
Paul O'Shaughnessy.
Paul O'Shaughnessy.
My classmate.
Shame on you. Or
I know.
for you.
I know, it's a traitor.
And it's just a whole host of folks from all over the country and of interest that are now, these stakes are where the musket balls were found. So we're now taking this classroom effort where we gathered our data and talked about it, and now we go to the field and go, oh, now look at it in its raw state and tell me what you see. What do you think? What do you feel? So a bunch of rangers, there's the world's smartest man pointing out exactly what happened. I don't know if there's any notables here. Oh, there's the Vietnam vet officer that has 2 Purple Hearts. Great guy. Howard Helfman, if you ever see Howard and run across him in the park, give him a big thanks. This is a top drawer guy, at least in my view. And there's O'Shaughnessy doing what O'Shaughnessy does, right?
Yep.
If you think I'm self-centered, whoa.
He's a good actor, though.
Indeed. So some of the other things to figure out, we have Vietnam vets. Okay, what do you know about 18th century technology? Not a lot. So this is part of a 1760 to 70 British field manual on what to do when you're marching down a road and people are being nasty to you. Well, does that fit Battle Road? Absolutely. So we dragged that up and started to understand who would be in front, who would be in back, how you send out pickets or flankers to keep the bad guys as far away from you as possible. Here is a pretty reasonable representation of probably what was happening. Now you hear about the stories of we all fired behind trees and rocks. We, again, I'm not in red. Yeah, you fought with your town as a unit because those are the only guys you knew. And you fought in the same way the Brits did. Now you're not stupid. If there's a rock wall, you're going to hide behind it. But it wasn't like farmers ran from their field and decided to jump behind a stone wall. That's just not the way it was on average during this day. It was organized, but yes, we used a good deal more of the concealment and cover and obstacles than the British column was to do. After all, their job is simple. I don't want to get massacred on the walk/run from North Bridge back to Boston. I got to do that as expeditiously as possible without leaving behind what? As many of my wounded as possible. I'd like to take them with me, thank you very much. So there is their job. Smith has got it. He knows he's in trouble. He made a big mistake. This is not going according to plan. How do I get back in the best possible way? And I think we've, with the help of some of this stuff, Jim Hollister of the park found this document, and it was spectacular. It's even documented to the 1st Brigade. This is some of the stuff that the officers on 1775 on that battle road had read before they were out there. That's what makes this kind of cool. Again, this is another one of the Doolittle prints that gives a hint of what's going on. This is at North Bridge. It shows us on this side, the Brits on this side. Not quite accurate. They did street firing, which is only 4 men across. So Doolittle was not particularly an officer of the
I still see
period.
what you mean. They could have put the flankers.
This guy is a former, this is Don Haggist, who's an expert on British Army in the 18th century.
Heighten the chronology of British.
This guy is cool.
Because if you can see slowdowns and speed, and I don't even know if it's possible with the archival record, you can probably notice that what they're doing is instead of moving the cohesive flankers, what they're doing is they're reacting as they hit pockets of resistance, not a solid wall of resistance. So as they hit pockets of resistance, they spread out, react, and keep moving. Spread out, react, and keep moving. Push it away.
He calls that the snake and ball. By the way, this is a real cool guy. I don't know if you know him. He lives in Concord. Robert Gross, the Minutemen in Our Times, some other cool books that he wrote. Good guy. Although he says if he had the data he's got today, he would rewrite the book. Which, that's good. Hello. No, don't do this to me. Okay. This is a bigger section of that airborne light order that we did. What we're trying to do here is this is clearly a schematic of the woodlot that we think it sort of looked like. And these are what you could see. What we tried to think about is, okay, it isn't just dirt. There are trees, but there are rocks. What can a British soldier actually see? Particular, what does a British officer actually see? And what does an American, i.e. Parker, actually see? So we're trying to figure out what obstructions, and these grayed out areas are places that are invisible. When you get there and you stand in a certain spot, you can't see beyond that spot because there's a rock or there's a little knoll or something else. So we're really getting pretty sophisticated here to try to figure out what the heck is going on. So you can see in the logos down here, this is 1,100 meters from Nelson Bridge, getting a little bit closer. I think these are cool, but not as cool. Now we're getting to the end of the show, so we're wrapping it up pretty fast here. This is another version of the musket balls, and now we're going to tell you what I think happened. So, right here, even though that's one heavier musket ball, Americans had caliber weapons all over the place. So you have to be careful in the 18th century to make any hard and fast rule. But here are the heavier ones, and you can see this arc below the top of the ridge, and you can see this. So here's our murder mystery solved. The British column comes charging down here. By the way, being chased by all the guys that fought at North Bridge, plus all the towns that met him at Miriam's Corner, that caught up to them at Bloody Angle. They're all coagulating here. So the British are highly motivated to keep moving, okay? Highly motivated. They get to this choke point. There's the bridge. Whether it's there, you got that by now. And Smith sends out some flankers. Was it a half company or a full company? Little difficult to say, because again, we're back to that question of recovery rate. 32 musket balls, but how many were fired? Let's assume a company of light infantry, which by the way has been decimated by this point. So they start out at about 38 guys, probably no more than 20. They fire once, that's 20 musket balls, okay? Parker, what did we say? 50-ish? Fired once, how many is that? 50 musket balls. So if they fired once, there's 80 musket balls out there. What's 32? Man, you're looking at 40% recovery. That is spectacularly high. Now those are assumptions, but let's take it for the moment. What I think happened is that a company, Meg says a half company, but the fact that they've been decimated, they probably lost a lot of their guys, because what Smith did is he kept the same guys in front for a long time. Well, who gets killed then? The guys in the front, or wounded. I don't mean to be too macabre. So I think something on the order of 20 guys display right here. And that's only about 25 meters. It's about right. 1 yard per guy, right? The Americans seem display. Parker's had plenty of time to be. He's had 2 to 3 hours to be here. What time is it? He left at noon. How far is it here? 5 miles from what is 2 o'clock? But if it's 5 miles and they've been pushed, it's probably closer to 1:30. Parker may have been there for 2 hours anyway. So he's got just below the military crest, he's got him nailed, because they're not going to go up here. Because the Americans would have been, if they got flanked by the Brits, they're all dead, which is why the Navy guy's an idiot in that case. But this is sloping ground, so the Americans can run away, and this road does an arc like that. They ran away and got him again back here. It's not clear that it was Parker's guy, because we don't have any primary document, but there's a dead body found in the 1920s under Route 2A, right there at the foot of the bluff. Rest my case on that one. The guy just didn't commit suicide, not to be, again, flippant. But, so, I think, the Americans fired first at a concentrated group of guys. Parker then said, we did our job, we're out of here. And these guys then fired them as they're scattering going back here. So first fires the American, small caliber musket balls here, one big skip, 41A. These guys are British soldiers, fairly disciplined. I mean, look at that line. This is some sergeant's doing his job. Now, by the way, they're really standing there, right? Because these are where the balls landed, and you're coming downhill. So the men are a tad closer to the Americans than these lines appear. Then they're firing back at the Americans. The one, did she mess up? The one dropped is not way up there. But let's assume it is. I'll take her at her word. There's the dropped one. Again, right in this line. We fired once and took off. So I am virtually positive we have discovered the murder mystery of 1:30 Wednesday, 19th April, 1775, on the bounds of Lincoln. Captain Parker's there with roughly 50 guys. He's got plenty of time to set up an outstanding ambush right in this bowl. He's got the high ground, and he's got an excellent place to retreat. The British are fighting for their lives. They're running short of ammunition. Not far from here, as they go up Concord Hill, they're out. That's why they panic and run into Lexington town, beat feet through the green, and head towards Monroe Tavern. They don't know it, but they've got more ammunition, and they've got Percy's relief column. These guys are in hot water. They've got to get these guys out of there. They can see them. They push them out with one company of light infantry. They exchange each one volley, and that's it. They keep moving. So how long did this last?
10 minutes.
A couple minutes. I think under 100 musket balls were fired. I think our recovery rate was outstanding. I think a lot of musket balls are buried in trees that were cut down and used as firewood, so the musket balls walked away. But the ones that did not, we got 32 of them. And I guarantee if we went back there today, we'd find more, because there's immense amounts of 19th and 20th century trash that masked a lot of good stuff. So this representation is what I've described. The British coming down, Parker's men, I think they were a little bit. So is it political to be red or blue? Is that like the liberal? Never mind. That's beyond our scope. So there's the first American fire. Meg thinks we were concentrated. I don't think so. I think the Parker spread his guys out. There's no sense being in a mass in this ambush and getting captured. Remember, he'd already lost 19 people, killed or wounded in the morning. And we beat feet right up that bowl. It's very flat land. The British, I don't think they chased very far. Why would you bother? If they're running, that's it. These guys are dead tired. Don't run any more than you have to.
Can you tell me what the distance was between the curve and the roll and Parker's people?
Probably under 50 meters. Now, that is it's 3 o'clock. Try to see who participated in this. It's an amazing amalgam of civilians, government, and interested body. It took 7 years to get where we are today. And now that everybody's walking out on me, I appreciate your efforts a lot. Thanks for listening. And I will take questions, though. I'm pretty sure we're done.
They'll be back.
Pardon me?
Let's give Bill a hand for anybody who can't stay.
I will take questions. I do have a couple more minutes, sure.
The first two shots that were not on the green, you said, are both flash in the pan?
Yes.
And they're loud enough to be heard?
You can see them, and there'll be smoke, and it was just daybreak then.
More visual than
Yes.
noise?
No noise, actually. It'd probably been a bit.
Right.
That's what you do.
okay.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
How do you get the muskets documented? The reason why is I have
I think,
How do you get muskets documented?
the cannonballs. I have a cannonball that came out of the Monroe Tavern,
Okay.
but it was hearsay. It was my husband's side of the family, and they
Right.
dug it out of the wall, and it was just brought down by generation to generation. But I
It's
don't
tough
know.
to say. British musket cannonballs at the time, some of them had a broad arrow in it. That's a very good indication. So you look for a broad arrow.
It's perfectly round.
It's perfectly round. It should have a seam to it. It almost
Yes.
always will have a seam.
Yeah.
Then the chances are, I'll give you statistically, you have an 18th century musket ball that has a 50% chance of being fired on that day.
Right.
That's what I'd say.
Okay.
That's as good as you can do, probably.
All right.
in the back.
How far do the musket balls go when they're short?
Right. I wish I could do more. There's so much more to talk about. But we asked that question because you can't really understand this unless you know what the weaponry does. So I went down with Georgia with a bunch of other guys. We built a range that was 100 yards long with a big dirt pile and a stockade made of live oak. And we said, we're going to shoot musket balls and see what the ballistics tell us. I was able, with a reproduction farmer's Fowler with a relatively small diameter bore and a 5-foot barrel, which is what they carried on the day. There are 3 of them from April 19th in the Concord Museum, and we modeled one after one of those. I shot 5 rounds at 100 yards and hit a 12-inch circle. Okay?
5 times?
5 times. I took a brown Bess, and it took me 9 shots to hit a 7-inch square at 30 yards. Once. So guess what we discovered is that American Fowler, even though it's still smooth bore, but with a smaller diameter ball, with the charge behind it for 5 feet, much higher charge. So the muzzle velocity of brown Bess is about 600 to 700 feet per second. What do you think it was for the Fowler?
Much higher.
How much higher? 1450. That because of that much flatter bullet, even though it had no spin to it, there was no stabilizing anything, I was able to put 5 rounds in a 12-inch circle. So it became a standoff weapon relative to a brown Bess. And that's very important to this fight. Parker had the advantage.
Next question here.
Sir.
Sir, on Old Mass Ave in Lexington, there's a stone monument, a small stone. It says near here are buried British soldiers. My question was, were they buried by their own comrades on
No.
the retreat?
Nope. All buried by Americans. There's a Daniel, I forgot his last name. Anyway, a surgeon from another town walked the battle road a week after it, and his documentation is horrible. He talks about the dead animals rotting and the broken windows and the burned trees and overturned rock walls. This was not fun. It was nasty. And there were no British soldiers. They were locked up in Boston. Never came out of Boston again. Once this was done, that's it. They're stuck there. So any internment of British soldiers is all done by us.
Just one more question. The reports you mentioned by the British officers, how did you find those?
Go upstairs and look for a book called We Were There by Vincent Kehoe. Read that and you'll be almost as smart as me.
Is there any evidence that the colonials used patched round balls?
No, in fact, it does not seem to make sense. The American weaponry, as well as the British, is a shotgun. That's all it is, except you're putting a round ball in it. And a military guy, what do you want? Rapid fire. A patch slows you down. So you just take this cartridge out, wrapped in paper, tear it off, put it in a pan, turn it around, dump the powder of the paper and the ball down the barrel and ram it. That's what you do. So they're patched to the extent that the paper forms a small seal to keep it, if you lower the barrel, from everything falling out. But they are not patched with cloth. That would be a rifle, and rifles were not here at that point. 0 rifles.
Any other
Presumably,
questions?
all the pellets you recovered were misses. So therefore, there were probably a lot more that were fired that hit humans.
That's entirely possible. Now, we can't say that they're misses for sure, because they can go through folks. If a British soldier was killed there and rotted away and wasn't buried, you don't know for sure. But probably they were misses. I will give you that. I would say that's the safest bet.
And also, don't you think people picked up a lot of musket balls?
You cannot find a musket ball laying on the ground, trust me. You're
Not
not
now,
gonna,
I mean,
Not
not
then.
long after the battle.
Nope.
There were no trees, no grass.
That's not quite true. That lot was a wood lot. So it wasn't undergrowth, but there were quite a few trees there used for firewood and building materials. And plenty of rocks, trust me. There are more rocks than you could ever imagine. So they fell into the crevices. We found one, stuck between 2 rocks. So you're asking a tough question to answer, but I will argue that those were mostly misses and nobody cleaned up the battlefield.
Okay.
That must be a sign.
Probably, I think it's time to wrap this up. So thank you again, Bill.
Sure thing.